There are only a couple of people in this world who give me voice envy, but our expert today is one of them. And even with me saying that, he doesn't believe his own voice is truly radio ready. Welcome to the Just Dumb Enough podcast, a show that acknowledges no one is always an expert by dispelling misconceptions with real experts. I'm your host as always, Colton Petrie. My guest today is Mike Seeley. Mike is a wonderful man with almost 3 decades of experience in building people up. Despite this, Mike still suffered from imposter syndrome when promoted to a new level. It's nothing to be embarrassed about, as every human since the dawn of time has probably felt it at least once, and it'll undoubtably outlast us all. So stick around and let Mike use his cheerful voice to charm you out of feeling like a failure. Also, the People's Choice Podcast Awards have announced that I am officially in the top 10 slate for society and culture. That itself is a huge honor, and I cannot wait to find out how I stack up against the very high-profile competition out there. Let's stop being imposters. Welcome to the show, Mike Seeley.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you on the show. I'm so excited. Can you introduce yourself a bit for the audience?
Certainly, yeah. Well, as you mentioned, my name is Mike Seeley. I run a small boutique business doing coaching, predominantly coaching with women and minorities, but also generally anybody, really, leaders, managers in business in the corporate world. And that's everything from people that have low self-esteem, self-limiting beliefs, that imposter syndrome. And I help with that, but also people in business who are looking at how they can increase their presence, increase performance, build teams, because I have a background in senior leadership management for over 25 years. So my background is around running businesses and operations. My most recent corporate job was as a vice president of global inclusion. But then I decided to step out of corporate life and set something up where I believe I could probably help and be valuable to more people.
Well, it's incredible. What brought you to, this mindset field to start with? Like, what drew you in to want to get involved in this?
Yeah, well, in terms of, thinking about a growth mindset and having imposter syndrome, that really started early in my career. I used to work for Hewlett-Packard. I was a senior leader. I got selected onto an accelerated development program for high potential leaders. So it was an honor to be selected for that. I was the only one out of the UK selected, and it was a kind of a global 1-year program. Now, the very first week of that program where everybody gets together, that took place in Palo Alto at corporate head offices of Hewlett-Packard. And we were listening to a presentation by the group CEO of the company. His name was Lou Platt. And then we went off to an evening dinner, supposed to be kind of a relaxed affair. I was sat next to the CEO and I did not know what to say to him. I was worried about saying the wrong thing. So it was really just silly small talk. And I felt personally so embarrassed. I had the voices in my head saying, you don't belong here, Mike. What are you doing? What are they going to think of you? All of those things just entered in. And of course, on top of all of that, you get the usual butterflies that you have in your stomach as well. So I was so relieved to come to the end of that dinner and get back to my hotel wondering, crumbs, what have I done? Have I failed? And I learned from it. And, I can talk about that process afterwards. But that was probably my most significant imposter syndrome moment. And I thought, I've got to do something about this. I cannot go on. If they've looked at me and thought you're a high performing, high potential individual, how could I have the attitude and the nervousness that I was displaying at the time? So that's where it came from, and obviously many years later led to writing the book about it.
Well, and talk about being a stranger in a strange land. You're like, it's a brand new company. You've never worked with them before. You're not even in your own country, so you've left that
Mm.
environment. And you're around a bunch of people who also aren't from your country. So you're like, okay, I share almost nothing in common with these people. Like
Yeah,
at the first glance level, you're like, I'm entirely different. What am I doing
yeah,
here?
yeah. I mean, I was comfortable in my own environment in the UK. I'd worked for the company for a number of years, for about 7 or 8 years, and leading teams. I was very comfortable doing that in my own environment, but I was put up at a higher level. I was in amongst, general managers and VPs all in the kind of the same room who I looked at them and I thought, that's real high potential there. And I couldn't even, I was trying to compare myself and I was saying that, I don't deserve to be on that level. So that's where it came from. So
Yeah. Well, and it seems like that's kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be very wrong, but the basis of imposter syndrome is just like that open comparison to the people around you makes you feel like you're woefully inadequate.
yeah, I mean imposter syndrome, there's a number of different things that create it, but that's certainly one of them when you're constantly comparing yourself to other people and saying to yourself, crumbs, they are much better than me, they talk much better than me, they perform much better than me. And you're really kind of building in all of these self-limiting beliefs about yourself. The other main thing for imposter syndrome, and this comes with even the most senior people and sportsmen, is fear of failure. They think, wow, if I'm performing in front of a big audience, what if something goes wrong? And so they clam up as a result of having that fear of actually failing and thinking that they may embarrass themselves as well. So yeah, imposter syndrome affects absolutely everybody at least a lot more than once.
Well, and it's interesting because you would think like the more success you have, the less likely you are to feel that way. And yet, people that are at the highest level probably feel this the most. Because when I was
Yeah,
looking this up, it's like, oh, famous examples of imposter syndrome, Albert Einstein.
yeah,
And I'm like, okay, well, this is a person who, is a legacy myth in the field. And yet, of course, he's going to feel that way because he's like, okay, I'm at the top of my game.
yeah.
What if I fail in front of literally everyone on the planet?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's one of the case studies I've captured in the book, Albert Einstein. It's amazing, some of the most famous people, even kind of more recently. I mean, a few weeks ago, actually, it was during the week of the media summit. I had happened to have read that week that Steph Curry had openly admitted that he constantly suffers from imposter syndrome. This is one of the top NBA players, used to playing under pressure, hitting shots with the timer, the buzzer about to, end the game. And you think about all of that pressure, and he worries about it, So it just goes to show that, no one is immune from imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, okay, you've got the highest shooting ratio in the NBA. What are you worried about? And he's like, well, I'm worried about missing because I have the highest ratio. Like,
Yeah,
of course I'm worried about it.
yeah.
And from that angle, like imposter syndrome seems entirely reasonable.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. But, it affects people even, right down to, I would say, kids as well. You think about, maybe teenagers who are shifting from high school to college or even to employment. New environment for them, it's a new feeling, new people to get to know. And when you go into a bigger place, maybe with a lot more students, you do feel small. You feel a bit inadequate there as well. So it's like starting the whole process again of getting to know people, getting used to the environment that you're in. It's like you've taken yourself out of your comfort zone. And that's where imposter syndrome really plays its part. Most people are comfortable when they're in a comfort zone and they're used to everything around them and the people around them. But the minute you step outside of that, everything becomes alien. And, one or two things happens when you're at that point because When you step outside the comfort zone, you get into what's known as a fear zone. And you either retreat very quickly back into your comfort zone, or you push through and get into the next zone, which is known as the growth zone. And if you can overcome those fears, it moves you into, a phase of learning and building confidence again. And that will happen till the next time you're ready to step out of that, because that means that you've created a new comfort zone. And then the next time you step out of that, you're back in a fear zone and it all starts again.
Well, and it's one of those that like there's really only one way forward, right? Because if you're the high school student that just went to college and you retreat into yourself, the next moment you're outside near people, like you have to embrace that fear zone again because you still haven't dealt with it. So
Yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
you're prolonging your own misery.
Yeah. And the thing is, there's many things that you can do to help yourself along the way. The more that you can do that, the easier it does become. And there are less situations or moments of having imposter syndrome. Even if you have to go and do a presentation in front of, an audience of say 2,000 people, you might get the initial butterflies, but if you're used to kind of making sure that you have a level of positivity, you say to yourself, I'm going there to provide value to the audience. There's things that you can do to quickly overcome that imposter syndrome and then get on with the job that you were there to do.
Well, and there has to be a certain amount of like comfort in your skills, right? Like people who
Hmm.
speak professionally, I know a lot of them have told me is they kind of just blank out in the middle. They're like, yeah, I get up there, I start speaking, and then it's just speech mode. And
Yeah.
it's not until I'm done that I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot there's 2,000 people in front of me.
But I think here's the crazy thing is what I've found in my own experience is the bigger the audience, the easier it is to speak. When you're speaking to a much smaller audience, maybe 20, 30 people, where you're almost very close to them, you can see their faces looking back at you. That's when it becomes nerve-wracking. That's when you think, crumbs, what if I say something that doesn't make sense to them? And what if somebody asks me a question that I can't answer? You start to get all of those feelings. But you're right, if a bigger audience, you don't even notice the faces. So you can, carry on. And it's only once you finish and you get up and you look back and you think, wow, did I really just speak to an audience of that size? But during that process, you're normally okay.
Well, and it really is like showing up to the race, so to speak, right? Like that's what
Mm,
getting out of this fear zone is into that growth zone is you're like, you have to just kind of embrace that, like, okay, I have to do this.
yeah.
So, how do we prep ourselves to like get ready to go? Because we're like, okay, I know I'm about to be really uncomfortable. What can I do to kind of set myself up for success?
Yeah, you have to continue to keep learning. And if you've got those self-limiting beliefs or you've got that fear of failure, or if there's a skill that you don't believe you have, you've got to be positive about it and say, something like, instead of I can't do this, you can maybe say, I can't do this yet. And it means that you're putting yourself into that phase of learning that skill or that ability. Some of the other things that you can do is really kind of look back on the skills that you do have and maybe, make sure that any setbacks you have along the way, that you reframe that into a learning experience. People are often fear failing, but I always say that failure is not the opposite of success. It's absolutely a prerequisite to success. It's a moment of learning. So you fail at something, you try and understand what went wrong, why it went wrong, and then figure out what you're going to do different the next time. And then already you've learned something. So these are some of the things that you can do to prepare. And I always say as well, getting over imposter syndrome, do things like surround yourself with people who have a growth mindset, people that can encourage you, push you, tell you not necessarily what you want to hear, but tell you as things are so that you can learn from it. But if you're around positive people that can encourage you and support you, it helps you in your own learning and your development anyway.
Yeah, to kind of find an honest critic, somebody who's
Mm,
like, look, I wouldn't buy your thing. but I could see where it would have value. And you're like, okay, well that's better than it's awful. Or
Yeah,
just saying like, oh, perfect, nailed it.
yeah,
Don't even worry about it. Like it's better to hear that like, not for me, but great.
yeah.
And I know a lot of artists do that over time, right? Like I know a lot of artists who have compared their work over the course of like 5 years. They're like, this was me 5 years ago, and this is me today. And
Yeah.
people are like, that's an incredible amount of growth. And they still have that thought to say, like, well, yeah, but I'm not where I want to be. I want to get to like this person's level. And they're like, that's
Yeah,
not what this is about. Like, we're talking about
yeah.
you.
Yeah, that's the comparison thing. And you have to, one of the things you have to do is stop comparing yourself to others. And most of the time you don't know what those individuals have been through or are going through, whether they have that imposter syndrome themselves. But, you have to, as you say, you have to only think about yourself. It's about you and your ability and what you're learning. And the best way that you can see how well you're performing, just like you said, is look at yourself a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago to where you are today. And more often than not, you can see that, yes, you have significantly improved and you're on that trajectory to continue, developing in that way.
Well, and there's this wonderful, like, a look into the future. If you tried to say, where am I going to be a year from now? You can wildly undershoot yourself because you're like, oh, I think I'll be 10% better. But really, like, that was the point in time where you were on this steep
Yeah.
upslope and you're like, oh, I'm 300% better. Like, I was just at that point where I thought I was plateauing and I absolutely wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always something new you can learn to take you to another level. For sure. You just got to think more broadly about your capabilities and your possibilities, think big and dream big, as they say.
And this makes me think about imposter syndrome because it's probably existed for all of mankind, right? Since we were before language, where we're like, oh, I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm going to go out and hunt well, and then we
Yeah.
might all die. And you're like, okay, well, if you're known as the best, like you better live up to it. And so there's going to be a lot of pressure like that. Do you think it's gotten worse or better over time now that we have more resources, but we also seem to
Mm.
have more, anxiety and depression, like in the populace?
Yeah, I actually, if I'm honest, I think it's got worse. It's got worse for a number of different reasons. If you look at the lockdown and COVID-19 and, the mental health challenges that has created, social media has put a lot of pressure on individuals to look a certain way, be a certain way, perform a certain way. And that has affected people from an imposter syndrome perspective. So yeah, unfortunately, it has got worse, and it's really a shame, which is why I want to help people to overcome that with the work that I do.
Well, and I could see that being a real problem, just the advent of the internet, right? That we can see everyone else's successes, I think
Mm.
naturally kind of fosters that imposter syndrome even more.
Yeah,
Because before we could only compare ourselves to the people we could physically see.
yeah,
And now we're like, I can compare myself to the number one in the world. So if you're like a kid in Spain learning to play basketball, you can compare yourself to Steph Curry in a moment's notice, and it's
yeah,
not at all a fair comparison.
yeah, yeah. And the interesting thing is what people end up looking at is the actual outcome and not the progress. So if you take a Michael Jordan or a Steph Curry, people will see the performance, but that is years and years of hard work, training, practice, all of those things to get to that level. And a lot of people don't see the progress that has been made. They only look at the final outcomes, and that's what they're comparing themselves to, not their hard work. People often say to achieve a skill at a top level, you need a minimum of 10,000 hours, right? I don't know how true that is, but you hear that phrase a lot, which really means that you need many, many hours of hard work behind the scenes. And it's that hard work that really plays its part in your self-limiting beliefs. Can I continue to do this? People give up at the first, second, or third hurdle. And it's those people who can fight through and get through those hurdles and those barriers with that I'm not going to give up type attitude where they start to see the progress come in. And then once you start seeing some level of progress, it then instills that belief that you can continue to grow and learn. But there are people that unfortunately will give up early on it because they think, oh, well, I'm not good enough. And that's a self-limiting belief that, we have to kind of get that out of people, which, as you mentioned earlier on, goes back many, many, many years. People have built in these insecurities either from how they were brought up. You think about people that have fears. If you're growing up as a child and say your mum is afraid of a spider or spiders in general, typically that gets reflected on the child. They become afraid of spiders. Probably don't know why they're afraid, only that their parents are afraid, and then you have to kind of learn to get over that, over years. So yeah, it's interesting where it all starts, but it's all about how you grow and learn and begin to develop and get out of those areas where you have a lack of confidence and beliefs.
Well, and it's interesting to think about this on like an interpersonal level because it could be happening on both sides of the conversation, right? Like a parent and their child. My mother had at one point said like, "Oh, that's a bad spider bite." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know spider bites could be bad." And so then I developed a fear of spiders. Meanwhile, in her, she's like, "Oh no, did I mess him up for life? Like, did I just?" And so everyone has it over these different things, and you can enforce it in each other without recognizing that it's happening.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And even not just with parents, but in schools as well. If a teacher tells you that you're not good enough, or a teacher encourages you, that can change the trajectory of someone's life, in terms of whether they go on and flourish or whether they constantly think that they're never going to be good enough. So it's all of these little things that really get ingrained in people's minds that start to shape what they believe in, what they don't believe in, how they perform, how they don't perform, and more importantly, what their capabilities are and what level those capabilities are at, and that's where they may get limited. So yeah, it's interesting. It's all the self-doubt, fear of failure, negative self-talk that people have. Sometimes the belief that you must conform to what other people are doing or saying. And this is how it kind of shapes people over time.
Well, and it seems like people, run into this one of two ways. They either like overwork themselves dramatically, right? Like I need to get better now. And so they practice, 1,000 of something over the weekend. And then they're just burned out. Like you've exhausted yourself. You've reinforced like bad habits and all
Yeah.
these things. Or there's people who are like, you know what? I'm not good enough at it. And they just like don't work on it until the last minute.
Yeah.
Like they kind of set themselves up for failure because they're like, oh, well, I'll get to it on Friday and Friday is game day. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
well, it's a wonder you didn't perform well. You didn't practice.
Yeah, and it's funny because people do when they, even if they're practicing, they're expecting to see results really quickly. And you have to be disciplined enough, to kind of measure, where you are now. And if you've, trained for a week, that incremental change, have you seen an incremental change? And you can note that down. It's like anybody who, people who work out in the gym, who lift weights, for example, they know what their limit is, but they want to lift more. So they practice at it and, slowly add, small weights on incrementally to try and get over the current limit or maximum they have. And it's how they get stronger over time with that practice. And it's the same for anything. You're learning to play an instrument. The more you practice, the better that you get over time.
Well, yeah, and I think people see that, they spend a weekend doing something really intensive, right? Like they go to a training camp or they start taking lessons and they're like, yeah, I got like 1% better, but it was only 1%. And you're like, okay, well, how long have you been doing it? Because if you've been
Mm.
doing it for 5 years and you got 1% better in a weekend, like that's actually an incredible amount of growth. So,
Mm.
it's a hard comparison because you're like, yeah, you don't see it from
Yeah.
last week, but if you see it again, that long distance picture is way different.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I guess, particularly if you're doing something personal and you've got a teacher or a coach, it's only the teacher or the coach that can see the improvements before you can yourself. And if you then trust in that coach or trust in that teacher to continue going forward, then before you know it, you're on another level, you know. So yeah, it's sometimes hard when you're doing it alone to see, you know, to see your improvements. So you do need maybe a teacher or a coach or a mentor or somebody that can actually see the progress within you.
Well, and that's another person to add that honest feedback,
Yeah,
right? Because they're like, "Are you an all-star?" No, but you're better than yesterday. And you're like, "Oh, good." Because it feels like when you have imposter syndrome, and I know, most of us have probably felt this even if we don't realize it, like success feels very short-lived. Like we think we're going to hit like this new milestone and success is just going to like shoot out of our bodies and we're going to feel amazing for the next, month straight.
yeah,
And
yeah,
realistically, like you feel good for a day and then you kind of like get back on yourself where you're like, "Oh, well, I still need to chase more success
yeah.
because I'm nowhere near where I want to be," even though that was like a great day.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I think one of the biggest examples that you see is people who join gyms in January because they've got a big goal to kind of lose weight or get a lot fitter. And then before Easter comes, they've given up because they're not seeing any results. But yeah, it's interesting, you know, how people and again, this is what I would describe as having that mental slavery inside, having those kind of fears and doubts that constantly are talking to you kind of in your head. And you have to kind of learn to emancipate yourself from that. You know, in the book, one of the quotes that I refer to is by Bob Marley, who had a song called Redemption Song. And there's a line in there that says, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. And the none but ourselves freeing our minds is really talking about this is your personal responsibility to emancipate yourselves from all of those negative thoughts that you have. And it's the only way that you're going to get through it by taking on the personal responsibility to change. I didn't even realize that what that message was until many years later when you kind of listen to the song and you understand that that's what he's talking about, that some of these fears and these self-limiting beliefs are all in our minds, you know.
Well, and it seems like, it's a reinforcing cycle, right? Like we're hard on ourselves, so we do worse work, so then we see worse results, and we kind of like we just build off that instead of seeing those positives.
Mhm.
So is there like an emancipation checklist that we can build that says like, look down this list anytime you start to feel like maybe that imposter syndrome's creeping up, something to kind of help break that cycle?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to kind of be able to reframe any setbacks as I've mentioned earlier. But what I would say is track and celebrate the small wins, celebrate the effort that you're making and not just the outcomes. You know, it's just like think about the gym scenario again. You know, celebrate the fact that you did a really good workout that day and it should be enough for you to think, right, I'm going to go back and have another great workout because all of these things are leading to your goals. In business, in the work environment, always kind of keep a note of the things that you've achieved over times and almost use that as a brag file almost that says, you know, I am capable of achieving things because I've got the proof here, you know, so I know that any new challenge I get, I can be successful because I've done it in the past. You know, so it's having those things that will begin to really instill those levels of confidence that you need to have to continue to grow. And that's all about creating that growth mindset. So yeah.
Well, and it seems like everyone probably needs a different way to reinforce that, right? Like I'm a very visual person. When I started the show, I bought a map of the
Hmm.
world and I just started coloring in places that had listened because I was like, "Oh,
Mm,
look, I can see that like it's getting more colorful. The world's getting
yeah.
a little brighter." And like just that visual reminder really helps me
Yeah.
because I still have those moments where I'm like, "Oh, does anyone care? Does anyone listen?" And then you like look to the map and you're like, "Oh, never mind." Like,
Yeah. There you
it's
go.
a really
That's
quick
the
way to check
reinforcement.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the reinforcement that you know, you are winning. You're achieving what you want to achieve, you know, and it gives you that level of confidence. So Absolutely. That's a great thing to do. And I bet, you can look back at the first couple of episodes that you did and listen back to the more recent ones and probably hear the difference in confidence that you had as a host, and the quality of it. That shows progress, basically.
Yeah, it's that retrospective. I just wonder, like, how many ways could we come up with for people to kind of make those? Because some people it's going to be journaling, right? Like
Mm.
I'm a terrible journaler. It's absolutely my worst skill. So if you were like, "Oh, you're going to track your success through journaling," I'd be like, "Oh, please don't." Like, I won't have
Yeah,
anything to look back on. So, I think people have to find the way that works for them because we see a lot of
absolutely.
people, like I've met people who say like journaling is the only answer. And I'm like, I'm
Right.
doomed.
No, no,
It's
yeah,
not going to work for me.
yeah. Now, there's many things, and obviously, I'm not we've not really kind of mentioned my book, which is called Mindset Unlocked, but there are a lot of exercises and anecdotes that you can tap into that might work for you as an individual. So you mentioned journaling. I've got that in the book. But if that's not your bag, if that's not what you like to do, then yes, steer away from it and do something that you think is gonna meet your particular needs as well. So people that are thinking about how do I get out of this? How do I make sure that I'm progressing? The book is designed in a way to kind of help people focus on, a specific area, just the way it's been written with lots of personal experiences in there and lots of experiences and case studies from, famous people. Because when you think, oh, well, that person is famous and they still have this problem, it kind of makes you feel, okay, well, I'm not alone in this, because these more famous people have the same problem as I do and they still succeed so there's things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to imagine that like 80% of people who have said, I'm the greatest of all time are just trying to make themselves believe it. They're like, if I say it out loud,
Yeah.
maybe I'll believe it more. And other people
Yeah.
see them and they're like, man, they are so confident. They know they're the greatest of all
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. And you know what? That is, when you hear people say that, that is them having what's known as that growth mindset. And they're maintaining that growth mindset. They're believing in themselves. If you don't believe in yourself first, then it's going to be pretty difficult for others to believe in you also. So you've got to have these, and in the back of the book, I think the last chapter, I've got 10 essential tips to achieving and maintaining a growth mindset. Believing in yourself is one of the first ones that are in there. And, along with things like being positive and being patient. The favorite one I put in there is do not fall in love with tradition, right? You've got to always look at breaking the status quo because the status quo keeps you in the same spot, right? So you've got to be able to break the status quo because things are changing all the time, but it means that it's moving you forward. It's keeping you up with technology and keeping you up with all the changes that are going on in the world. There are so many people, particularly in the business world, that will have that attitude, this is the way we've always done it. This has always worked. So there's no need to make any changes here, and that's maintaining the status quo, which, at some point means that you're leaving yourself behind, whether it's a whole company that's falling behind the competition or whether it's an individual falling behind their peers who are getting promoted above them. That's what happens when you try and maintain or stick to a status quo. So yeah, that's one of the things I have out of those 10 essential tips that I've written.
Yeah. Well, and there's nothing quite like complacency in the history of our world to show you how
Yeah,
bad it is, where you're like, oh, yeah, let's take a look with this major company, Blockbuster, a humongous global
yeah,
company that was renting out videos. And, when the offer for streaming came up, they're like, nah, it's a fad. It's going to go away. This is how we've
yeah,
always done it. People want to come in and rent videos. And
yeah.
now they don't exist.
Yeah, and there are so many case studies like that, and I love those types of case studies where, you've got technology that is constantly disrupting specific industries. You take Kodak, one of the biggest camera companies in the world, who decided they were going to stick with using film, even though digital cameras were new and just coming out, but they were no, this has been our cash cow for years and years and years, and all of a sudden, quickly go out of business. And I look at people like, Steve Jobs, and what he did with the iPhone. I mean, it's, as you know, it's more than just a phone. It is everything you want it to be, right? And you think about all of those industries that have been disrupted, as a result over the years. It's just incredible. But that is change, and change is the only constant, as they say.
Well, and even, those legacy industries like newspaper, right? We had newspapers for hundreds and hundreds of years. Eventually, the ones that wanted to survive had to adapt. They're like,
Yeah,
yes, we have an online presence. We have short form articles. We have paid subscriptions. Like, we don't
yeah,
just print newspapers anymore because
yeah,
they're like, it's not sustainable. Nobody cares when the thing in your pocket can access the entire world's information.
yes,
Like, 7 sheets delivered to your home's not that exciting anymore.
yeah, yeah. I've got an app on my iPad that gives me access to any newspaper, any magazine, all there on in a tablet. It's just phenomenal. Why would anybody go and pick one of those magazines off the shelf and pay, I don't know, $7 or $8 for it, right? When you've got it there on an app that's probably $10 a month as a subscription. And it's just the thing. And I know that there are still the traditional people who want something physical in their hands to read, and pages to turn, and things like that. But those people are fewer and fewer as well. So those companies that produce those have got to think and adapt to, the changing market. So yeah, and this is everywhere. This is not just technology. It's in everything. So
Well, you have to imagine those people feel that same imposter syndrome, whether they just reach the top of their market, like iPhone coming out, right? Trying to develop
yeah,
like touchscreen software and, mobile internet connection and stuff. And people are
yeah,
like, oh, is that going to be a thing? And they're like, man, I hope this is a thing.
yeah.
Like, if we fail this, it's going to be really bad.
Mm. You think about the traditional telephones. I've not had a telephone, a wired telephone in my home for, I can't tell you how many years. Everything is mobile phone technology now. And those organizations had to think very fast in terms of how they make that transition. So yeah, it's this world is moving at a rate of knots when it comes to technology. But when you look back in history and you look at what I call the 4 or 5 different industrial revolutions that have taken place, what that has done is it's been a disruptor. It's put people out of work, but yet it's created loads of new jobs. It's created efficiencies and increased productivity and all of those good things. So when you now look at, this latest industrial revolution we're seeing, which is AI, there are lots of people who are seeing those changes and are worried, oh, it's going to take my job, and, various things like that. But this is just normal. Every 20, 30 or 40 years, you see a huge revolution in technology or change.
Yeah.
And this is where we're at, unfortunately. And each of those changes increases imposter syndrome. It decreases confidence. It has all of those things. So imposter syndrome will never go away. It'll always be there, but it's all about how you manage yourself through those processes.
It's just kind of a byproduct of the human mind
Mm,
not quite ready to grow as much as it should.
yeah.
It's that's our self-conscious like holding ourselves back. Because yeah, every change like that throughout history, right, has been incredible. Like the invention of
Mm,
horseshoes and a plow, right,
mm,
increased production by like 500%. And they were like, oh, what an amazing thing. Like it's removed so much work, but it's increased our productivity. And then you get to like over farming, and now we've got a different problem. And then you get,
yeah.
so you're like everything kind of has to bounce, and it's scary. I think a lot of people look at AI and they're like, what if it takes out all traditional jobs that
Mm,
require technology? You're like, okay, well then what does it open up? Because you're not just going to eliminate, 75% of the workforce. You'd be
yeah.
like, yeah, we don't need any of these people anymore. Okay, well then what? Like, do we get to focus on things we want to do more? Like that's where I get excited is I'm like, oh, are we going to be able to
Yeah.
be like, oh, we're now a creator economy because we don't have to work super hard anymore. That like,
And the thing is with that, there's a few things. I think that people will naturally live longer as well. We already know that babies born today, on average, will live to just over 100 years old, 105. So you've got, when you think about everything from, oh, well, when do people retire? That people are fitter and they're living longer and they want to do more. So they're going to work longer, but they're going to do more things that are leisurely and less strenuous, because machines and everything will take on that harder labor and laborious tasks that exist. So yeah, the world is changing so quickly, and I think we'll get more to a place where the working week might only be 3 days, and people will have, a lot more leisure time and time to relax with families and friends and all of that. So I think that's a change we'll see over time where, maybe a 3 day working week will be the norm, and, a 4 day weekend will be all the rage.
yeah, like, oh, there's a holiday. I'm not gonna have to work for 8 days straight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man,
Oh,
Christmas is a
dear.
crazy season. But yeah, I mean, and it comes down to that, right? Like humans have short lives. I mean, long, I guess, compared to like our pets, but we have short lives and we're worried about how much we can do in that time period.
Yeah.
But if we now allow AI, like how it used to take me 3 weeks to sift through all this data for my scientific research, and I'm
Mm.
not going to pretend like I'm smart enough to do scientific research, but it used to take me 3 weeks. You're like, well, now AI can sift through that because it's doing is gathering data that's already inside of it. Like it does it in an hour.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, well, now I have
I've got all this
two,
time on
two,
my
two
hands.
weeks, 3 days, and whatever else left.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly that.
Fantastic. So what prompted you to put the book out? Like why'd you start writing it?
Yeah, well, it goes real back to, as I mentioned earlier on, just having that big imposter syndrome moment, sitting next to the group CEO of what was then a $32 billion organization with like 70 odd thousand employees. And there's me sitting next to this guy that's got this huge presence. And I wanted to be able to figure out, well, how do I get through that? And it took me years over time, and I did lots of different things. And I told myself, I like threw myself into those challenging moments. Like I can remember not long, I went on a Dale Carnegie speaking course and decided that anytime I have to do a presentation or speak, I'm just gonna volunteer and go ahead and do it. Whereas before, I was nervous for weeks about the presentation, getting it together, doing the talk, and the closer it got to actually delivering that, the nerves increased and increased and increased. And I thought, this can't be a way of working. So one of the reasons that, I ended up writing the book was to really kind of capture what I had learned, how I'd got through it, also sharing some case studies because I want other people who I know go through similar things not to struggle with it and not to, have to go through those issues that may at some point cause, some kind of mental health. But in addition, they could lose potential opportunities as a result, like a big promotion opportunity or something like that. So I wanted to find a way that could help other people to recognize that actually this is just a temporary state that they're in. And there are ways that they can overcome the feelings that they do have. So that's what led to putting the book together and writing that. And I'm just hoping that it helps people. It's not necessarily for people who are in business. It's for everybody. And that's why it's, the subtitle is how leaders, learners, and dreamers crush self-doubt and find their true potential, something along those lines. So it could be anybody, a mother who is returning to work from maternity leave. They go through that whole imposter syndrome, as I mentioned earlier on, maybe someone transitioning from high school to college, or, a young sportsman becoming a professional and going into the professional game. Everybody gets it, has these challenges. And I'm hoping that this is just kind of one book and it's written not from a point of here's all the theory. It's written from a point of here are some of the experiences. and there's shared experiences that hopefully people can resonate with and learn from. So yeah, that was the driving force behind writing that book.
I love that because it's kind of like like I had to work really hard to drag myself up this cliffside, and now I'm going to lower a hand to try and help somebody
Yeah,
else.
yeah,
You're like, you
yeah,
don't have to do it alone. Like, there are
yeah.
people out here who have experienced it, who've been through this. We're all here to give you a hand up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. Well, make sure to tell people, again, name of the book, where they can find it, where they can find more from you if they're
Mm.
looking to learn more.
Yeah. So as I said, the book is called Mindset Unlocked: How Learners, Leaders, and Dreamers Cross Self-Doubt and Find Their True Potential. That book is available on Amazon. It's not in the audio format, unfortunately. So it's only on digital format or on hard copy format. But it's there, and hopefully it will help. In terms of me and my services, people can reach out to me via LinkedIn. I'm always happy to hear, people's experience of it, and particularly if they want help, I have services that can provide that, and I'm always happy to, help people through this with, direct coaching and things like that. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me. It is via LinkedIn. But also the book, it was a big help, and that's available on Amazon. And I think that's one of the easiest channels to, that's why it's published there, because everybody can access. Hopefully, everybody can access Amazon.
Absolutely. And I will put links in the show notes for anybody who's looking for it. There's a quick drop down you can just click, take you to your LinkedIn, take you to the Amazon book, leave good reviews for it, right? If this
Yes.
helps you,
Oh,
like
yes, please.
help the book to help other people. And that
Yeah.
is what good reviews do. I think we need to get you like into the studio and do an audiobook because you have a wonderful voice. And I would
Oh,
love to
thank you.
I would just listen to that on repeat. Like, all right, tell me about it.
Yeah, somebody else has said that to me. So maybe you've given it some confirmation for me that maybe I do need to go and create the audio version of it for sure. So yeah.
Awesome, Mike. Well, thank you again so much for being here. I've appreciated your time immensely. This is wonderful.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Colton, and thank you for inviting me onto your show. It has been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed speaking to you about it.
This has actually been a really big month for Imposter Syndrome for me personally. Along with the award nominations and all the travel, I've also started an Instagram art account separate from this show that has blown up. It certainly makes me feel like I'm not supposed to be surrounded by the people that I am, but I'm thankful for the friends and fans who have kept me grounded and so grateful. In ranking news, August is here, and the global ranks are now as follows. Number 1, the United States, with Texas, Wisconsin, and Washington at an early lead. Number 2, Australia, with Victoria just over their southern friends. Number 3, Canada, with Ontario just over Nova Scotia. Number 4, Ireland. And number 5, Scotland of the United Kingdom, leading their British partners. That's it for this week. Have a great week, a great weekend, and I'll see you all back here next week for another new episode. Until that next episode, pretty pleased to all those things that help the show grow, like rating, reviewing, liking, and subscribing. Also, remember you can reach out to dumbenoughpodcast@gmail.com or on any of the social medias if you want to reach me personally. But most importantly, stay dumb.